Hey, friends. Welcome to Dishing on Divorce Tuesday edition on WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network Radio, Podcasts, and TV. I'm your host, Lisa Lisser, CEO and founder of LZL Coaching, a boutique coaching firm focused on divorce, relationships, and life transitions. I'm also a divorced mom of 3 now grown kids, a recovering lawyer, a Jewish educator and spiritual counselor, and a divorce coach who is committed to transforming the divorce experience for everyone involved. One of the experiences that many people have when they're first thinking about divorce is who you're going to call. Now, for most people, their first thought is the lawyer. I have to get a lawyer. How am I going to get a lawyer? But maybe going for the lawyer first is not your first best move. And that's what we're going to talk about. So today I'm interviewing Rosalia Labate, who is a CPA, a CDFA, a CVA, and an MFA. Now, this is a reprise of an earlier interview that the two of us did together, and we recognize that our conversation is so in sync because we are, and our philosophy behind divorce is the same thing. So I want to invite Rosalia to say hi and to give a brief background of who you are and what you do. And then I'm going to dig into the question of why lawyering up is not necessarily your first move. Rosalia, tell us about yourself.
Well, hi, Lisa, and thank you for that wonderful introduction. So I'm Rosalia Labate. As you said, I'm a CPA and have been a CPA for longer than I care to remember. A large part of my work is divorce related. So day in and day out, I'm working on all facets of the financial aspects of someone going through the divorce process. I specialize in financial forensics, business valuation, litigation support. I'm also trained in mediation and collaborative divorce as well.
That's amazing. And I know that your focus is to get clients to look at the numbers before they do anything else. So let me read a little bit from your website, if that's okay.
Sure.
For my audience, this is what Rosalia says. If you're thinking about divorce and have no clue what to do, or if you do have a clue and you want to get it all together, work with Rosalia first. Do you think you'll get it from your spouse after you serve them with papers? And the answer to that question is probably no. That's when you start fighting. An attorney, says Rosalia, will give you the form to fill out, or they'll try to do it themselves. And the details and the numbers form the basis of alimony and child support, and ultimately what you're going to get out of the marriage in the end. Now, who do you think knows that better, the attorney or the financial professional? So yes, you need an attorney to get advice, but it doesn't mean you have to be powerless. And of course, you do need an attorney, but why would you go to the attorney without understanding your financial future or your financial landscape? Why pay the lawyer at double or triple the cost to figure out the numbers instead of a financial professional? And why not go into that office armed with the right information? That's what we're going to talk about today. How hiring the financial professional first, and really hiring the coach to guide you toward the financial professional, is maybe step 1 and step 2 of how you launch your divorce in the most effective way possible. So with that in mind, Rosalia, tell us a little bit more about how you came to this sort of aha awareness.
That's interesting. So through the years, I've had clients that have come to me through their attorneys at the most ideal time, a lot of times at the 11th hour. And I found that the client didn't necessarily understand the financial issues at hand and what was involved in the divorce process. And I firmly believe that it takes a village to get divorced, because it's it's right up there with one of the most horrible moments in your life with, along with divorce, death, and taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's highly emotionally charged, as you know, and not understanding the financial picture just puts you're in this big black hole. And, and a lot of times, the other partner was taking care of the financial information. And so you don't know.
Right.
A lot of times, can I keep the house? Are there assets missing? What am I entitled to? I mean, I've had clients that didn't know what their tax returns looked like. They were shocked when I explained to them what they meant, when I told them the story.
So let me jump in a little bit here. So for me, when I went through my divorce, I went to the lawyer first. We went to lawyers and then we went to mediators. And the mediators didn't move anything forward because there was no impetus for my spouse, who was the one in charge of the money, to forward documents, to get the numbers right out there. And I didn't even know I could hire a financial professional for myself. So my lawyer never suggested I do that. Everyone kind of was guessing what the resources were and trusting that my soon-to-be ex would provide that information. But it doesn't always happen that way. And had I taken control of my financial future, as opposed to letting other people take care of me, which is what I felt I needed. I'm not going to fault any person who doesn't get the right help, because they think when they hire one professional, that professional will take care of them. And so it's a logical mindset, but it may not be the most practical. And so that's where hiring the financial professional fits in so perfectly, because you are going to help them. You're not going to take care of them, but you're going to help them take care of themselves. So tell us a little bit more about that.
So, the lawyer is there for lawyering, as we said. I've seen, attorneys try to work on the financial information, but when your matter comes in, they're looking at the legal aspects of the matter and how to push that forward. Who's pushing forward the financial information for you? As you said, no one helped you with discovery. If I would have been there, I would have demanded, in mediation, I'm the financial neutral. So I'm working with both spouses.
So before we go even deeper in that, because I love that you're the financial neutral, but why don't we share a little bit? I don't know who's listening or from where. What is mediation? We've been using that word. So why don't you describe, like, technically, what is mediation?
So mediation is when a couple hires a mediator. It could be an attorney, it could be anyone, really. And they help facilitate the process for both spouses to come to an agreement on parenting time, a settlement agreement, the financial information. Everything theoretically should be on the table, and everyone should understand everything that's going on.
But let me just put in here also, the mediator is a neutral third party.
Correct.
So the definition of mediation is you hire someone to facilitate the two of you coming to agreement. So no one is forcing you to make a decision if you feel that decision is against your interest. It's the agency is in your hands. And that's why many people choose mediation as opposed to the courts, because you're the one who ultimately is making that decision. And so whether you like it or not, it's your responsibility, which again is why having a financial neutral in the room as well as the mediator can be very empowering, because that person is really looking at the whole landscape. So tell us how that works.
Right. And I mean, the whole goal of the process is to be amicable, for
Yeah.
both parties to be amicable. And I'm sure, and I've seen, and I've dealt with situations where there was a part of the process where they weren't amicable and they couldn't agree. And that's when the whole group comes together to turn that around and to put it on a better plane.
Right.
So to your point, you're working with the mediator, you're working with the financial professional, all of the information is coming together, all of the information is being shared, nothing is hidden, and you come to a resolution.
Right. And you actually have more confidence then that the resolution is based on information. Right?
Correct.
When you don't hire the financial professional, you're relying on someone else, or like your soon to be ex, to be the one to provide the information. And if you can't analyze it, I think that's really, if you can't analyze it with the help of a financial professional, that's where you're at a disadvantage.
Well, and when you're in the mediation process, the mediator is going to ask you to prepare the financial information. And if you haven't been involved, you have to have faith that the other side is doing the right thing. And the question becomes, are you comfortable with that?
Right. And that's where also the definition of amicable comes in, right? What is amicable? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're friends or that you get along great. It means that you're doing this in a way that with good faith, you're trying to get to the right result. But you're relying on the good faith of your soon-to-be ex. So to be more armed with knowledge is the best way to walk in.
Well, and if you have the financial neutral,
Right.
I work with both sides to come up with the information. And the motto, I keep thinking of the motto, trust but verify.
Right. Trust but verify. So that, it makes a lot of sense. And yet there are some spouses who will say, what do you mean you need to verify? Don't you trust me? And that's where you get into a little bit of a back and forth. But when you stand your ground and say, look, I trust you, this is just to confirm my trust, that may be a way to move forward by having that financial neutral as part of the process.
Agreed.
So what else? What have you seen where, a client may have had less information, but you sort of uncovered something that they needed to know?
Oh boy. Let's see. In the long period of time that I have been doing this, I have yet to see a financial affidavit that has been accurate. When you're preparing the financial information for divorce, it's very, very different than any other animal, if you will. There are certain things to be taken into consideration, and the clients experience aha moments throughout my process with them. There's also, there are things that I find that my client wasn't aware of, or there are things that I find that neither spouse was aware of.
Right.
So it's one of the funner parts of my job. I love doing that. I love educating people on their financial circumstances. I mean, this is your life. You're making a decision that's going to affect the rest of your life, especially if you've been married, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. I've had couples that, I think my oldest couple, the husband was 76.
Wow.
So yeah, yes. So it runs the gamut. it runs the gamut.
I'm sure it does. And how do you manage clients who, and this is maybe where a divorce coach can be support for you, where they're embarrassed or ashamed that they don't know what they need to know. And they feel like they've been blindsided because they did it to themselves. Like, how do you respond to that?
Oh, that happens so often. I can't even begin to tell you how often that happens. And I try to explain to them that generally in a partnership, everyone had their roles.
Right.
And some people take it differently. I think a divorce coach can be key in the process because the whole process itself to begin with is very difficult. And having the divorce coach on board so that not only are you aware of what's going to happen in potential scenarios, I see the divorce coach, such as yourself, helping my client, let's just say, carry themselves better and go through the process with grace and dignity, as opposed to being surprised along the way and just having all this anxiety heaped onto them and not knowing what to do with that, because a lot of times that will come out during my meetings with them, or the attorney's meetings with them, or the mediators meetings, or even worse, they'll take it out on the kids.
Yeah.
So
anxiety is the key emotion here. It's like it can be an animal that takes over. It's triggered whenever you start thinking about different aspects of the divorce. It starts with, where am I going to live? What am I going to do? Or how did this happen to me? How come I didn't know? And all of the doubts about your relationship and your judgment and how you see the world. That's where it starts. But then we find, as coaches, that money is a real trigger. It's a trigger on both ends. So the spouse who may have been earning more money or all of the money doesn't want to let go, is triggered and is anxious about having to live with less. And the non-working spouse is triggered because they feel like they had a bargain and they did XYZ at home while the other spouse earn the living, and they feel at such a loss that they're triggered and in fear that they won't have what they need. So on both sides, we see anxiety being the animal that is not allowing people to be their best selves. So what I do in my work is I help them pause to say, okay, what's the trigger here? What's going on? When does the trigger start? And I walk through a situation with them that may be their triggering moment. And I say, so how has the conflict gone so far? And how would you like it to go? And what do you feel when that's happening? And how do we communicate that to your co-parent or to your financial professional or to your lawyer or to your kids? All of these people are part of the process. When I say I want to transform the divorce experience for everyone involved, I mean everyone involved, because this is not something that's just happening to two people in a room. It's happening to everyone in their small universe, but it's still a universe. So that's why, from my perspective, helping people who feel like they have no information get that information is so empowering. And that's where I see your work coming in. You are empowering the couple on both ends to recognize this is what it is. And now we have a platform so we know where to go. Does that sound like I'm getting you right?
Oh my goodness, yes. Yes. One of the most satisfying things about what I do is watching the client go from that, I keep mentioning this big black hole, progress to, wow, I know what there is to know. I can have a conversation about it. Whether or not I take care of the finances, I understand it. And now I am armed with that power and that education to make informed decisions that are going to affect the rest of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about those decisions after we take a quick break. So now a word from our sponsors. And we're back with Rosalia Labate, CPA, CDFA, MFAA, and a host of other letters. CVA and MAFF. Sorry. One of the things that Rosalia shared with us is that her joy essentially is helping people understand their financial picture, especially people who haven't seen it before, people who've been out of that financial loop in their marriage responsibilities. How does that impact the other spouse? When you're working with both of them, what do you see on the moneyed spouse who maybe isn't quite sure they want their soon-to-be ex to know everything?
That is an interesting question. That is a very interesting question. There are times when it angers them. I can actually say it angers them because better than I do, but it seems as if they at one point had financial control, and now that control has been taken from them.
And yeah, and so when people don't always recognize that marriage is about more than love, right? Marriage is a financial institution that is like the bedrock of social networks. And you don't have to be married to have the bedrock, but in society, you would look at marriage as the beginning of a family unit that created children who were then going to be the next generation of workers. And getting married was financially necessary. Now, because women are working more, it's a whole different environment for what the needs and the rules are of family harmony. And since the 1970s, when women's rights were raised up, there's been an increase in divorce because women have a new sense of power. And I think that was really when no-fault divorce became more common. And now no-fault divorce is the rule. And in fact, when people want to file a complaint that says infidelity, we need to let them know that that's not going to get them more financially, and it's going to be hard to prove, and it'll bring up a lot of emotional baggage. So let's go with no fault and look at this as a financial transaction. But people are still doing the same things that led to divorce or led to family disharmony. They just don't recognize the ramifications. So I guess it's a lot of words to say, take care of your marriage, because if you don't, you will have the risk of it getting divorced, and it's going to be hard for both of you. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. Yes, most certainly it makes sense. It's interesting. I saw the statistic the other day where more females are entrepreneurs and opening up their own businesses than ever before. So it's a very interesting commentary that you just made. That really Yeah.
And I find that in more cases, not in all cases, but in more cases, it's the husband who had been the primary wage earner in the family. And they think that they have control over all of the finances. And so they're entitled to keep all of that. And that's where you're bringing this up in a neutral space where both of them involved can, I imagine, lead to this anger, this frustration, this not wanting to let go. And that's a challenge. That's where, just like with co-parenting, how do you get two people in the room when one person wants to maintain some things on the side and the other is looking for them?
Right. And it also happens in, the contested matters.
Yes, of
So
course.
it becomes even more inflammatory then because you don't know what the other person is thinking. So that's something where I see you as being key to being, to responding and assisting in all of that as well. It's very emotionally charged and very complicated, and some of the things you're referring to are very common.
Yeah.
It's not unusual for one party to be angered that someone else now knows their secret, if you will.
Yeah.
And the other party may be angry over what they've discovered.
Like, how could you do this? I'm digressing a little, but I've been reading the Cher memoir, Sonny and Cher and Cher. And what I never knew was that when she left him, she discovered, or before she left him, she discovered that the contracts they had completely took all of the money that she earned and gave it to her partner. And so she had no control and she had nothing if she didn't stay married. And so there was a lot of legal stuff that went on way back when in the 70s, but it was all brand new. And she spent 10, 12 years being under the protection of a person who was actually taking advantage of her, even if he loved her. Like, we can do that to people that we love. So it doesn't necessarily have such huge disconnect. But it's interesting because I'm reading the book as you and I are talking. So that just was like sort of an aha moment for me.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. I have to get that book and read that book as well.
Yeah, I've been listening to it, and she's talking, so it's great.
Love her.
Right? I mean, we all go through our different life journeys, and we all need to sort of be aware of where we're hitting a boundary. And for some of us, those boundaries have been very set in a financial way, where one person's turf was the money and the other person's turf was the kids. And it can go along fine that way until things aren't fine. And so part of what we also are doing is talking about how do we as married people start raising up our own knowledge so we don't get to a place where there's such a lopsided information bucket, right? So when would you suggest that people, in a marriage, in a relationship, or just in life in general, start talking to a financial professional?
Well, I think it depends on the circumstances, but I think the couple from day one, especially if they've gotten married from day one, they should be having conversations on some kind of basis so that everyone is aware of what's going on. People don't like to talk about it, but what if something happened to your partner? Where would you get that information? Is there Is there a will out there? Is there a trust out there? Do you know what's out there? So I think it's very important to maintain an ongoing conversation at all, at all times.
Yeah.
So everyone is educated, everybody is knowledgeable. I think two heads are better than one when it comes to those kinds of things as well.
Yeah. And I think that what happens in marriages is that people sometimes assume the other knows or assume the other doesn't know. And what I've heard and read is that people are more reluctant to talk about money than they are to talk about sex. And people sometimes are still reluctant to talk about sex even with their partners. So what we see is sort of a dynamic where people's relationship to money is distorted to start because they're afraid to get their hands around everything. And that only comes to a fore when you're getting divorced. So that's why I always recommend a financial professional to help. Whether you think you knew everything about your money or not, it's important to have a financial professional there. And in an amicable situation, or let's just call it a situation where you want to resolve the marriage on your own terms, that's when you choose to hire the financial.
Well, interestingly enough, I've also worked with people that knew the financial circumstances.
Okay.
But when they went through the process with me, they learned more about their financial circumstances. So it's not a one size fits all. And yes, I definitely see a tremendous amount of anxiety with a lot of people that have not been exposed to the financial matters. And Lisa, you're key in
Well,
helping them get through that process.
I really work hard to help my clients see that they are entitled to know more, right? Very often they feel like it's not their business, or they don't know if it should be their business. I'm not saying business in a real sense, but in colloquially, we don't always feel like we are allowed to ask the same questions that someone else might ask. And my role is to help my clients find the questions so they can get the answers they need, right? They don't necessarily know what they need to ask about. They don't know what might be hidden or what might not be hidden. And they also don't know what to invest or whether they should invest in getting those answers. They don't necessarily believe that, their own personal value is enough for them to invest in the knowledge. And that's where I come in to say, of course you're worth it. You should get the information from someone who can actually help you, and then you can move forward in strength. And maybe your co-parent or your soon-to-be ex doesn't expect you to have that information. And so that's going to shift your whole dynamic too. And they can respect you more if you know what you're talking about. And no one really looks at it that way because they're often afraid that, oh no, if he knows that I did this, then. And so then I ask, so then what? What will happen? And we move from there. And that's how I help people sort of regain their own power, the self-empowerment piece.
Yeah, I have also seen, circumstances where the financially astute spouse wanted his or her partner to know about the financial circumstances.
Wow. That's
And
great.
I literally had a gentleman reach out to me, and he said to me, I wish I would have known you when I was getting divorced, because my wife didn't understand the business. She didn't understand the financial information. You would have helped her and moved the ball farther along than the attorney actually did.
So what's interesting when you say that, I'm thinking it's real. Sometimes people want to be in the dark. it's easier for them to be ignorant. And I'm not using ignorant in a derogatory way, but it's easier not to know, because maybe you didn't think you had a head for money or numbers. Maybe you just don't like numbers and you just want things done for you. You're reliant on that, and that works. But once you start to get some information, then you recognize that this is a whole different reality. I can live differently if I have the knowledge. So I love hearing that this spouse wished that his wife took the ownership and started to learn about the numbers, so that there could have been a different aspect to their marriage and to their divorce.
Yes, I don't want it to sound like everyone's trying to hide from each other.
Right.
And,
I appreciate that. I appreciate that, because with my clients, it tends to be that, as opposed to the opposite. So I really appreciate that you're sharing that sometimes the person with the knowledge brings the person without the knowledge to the financial professional so that they both can know what's going on. And that's really an amazing situation. So let's land on that one. We're kind of at the end of our half hour. Rosalia, this has been such a great conversation. Can you share with my audience how people can find you?
Sure, of course. They can call me, 516-996-7788. I'd love to speak to you and hopefully answer some questions and be able to help you. And you have my website below, as well as my email address.
If you could read it out, because some of our audience is going to be listening.
Sure. It's Rosalia, Rosalaa, at labatecpa.com. LAB as in boy, AT as in Tom, E, CPA.com, or www.labatecpa.com. Again, that's LABATE. And thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, thank you so much. And to bring it back around to our original premise, knowing the finances is the beginning step to having a successful divorce. So before you call the lawyer, call the financial professional. And maybe if you're not ready for that, call the coach, because the coach is going to direct you to the financial professional who best meets your needs. And Rosalia is definitely one of them. So I so appreciate you being here. For my audience, you can find me at lzlcoaching.com, and you can email me at lisa@lzlcoaching.com. We'll see you next time.